Galapagos has attracted scientists and travelers alike for more than 50 years. However, once people visited the islands, they had little opportunity to stay associated with them. So we saw a need to build a bridge connecting individuals and institutions with the critical conservation work in Galapagos. The islands are a complex system that combines biodiversity and ecosystems with a resident human population. There's nowhere else on Earth quite like it. Often when humans and wilderness meet, wilderness loses. Helping the Ecuadorian government and others working there to find a balance between these two strong pulls is what Galapagos Conservancy, or GC, ultimately seeks to do. What Galapagos means to the history of science, to conservation, and to our own understanding of our place in the natural world is too important to lose. That's why we're here. Galapagos provides us with perhaps the greatest opportunity to show what we can do as a society to protect a wild, extraordinary place. Galapagos Conservancy directs its work principally at protecting and conserving the unique biodiversity and ecosystems of Galapagos. Our work focuses on restoration efforts, including reestablishing a reproductive population of tortoises on Pinta Island, enhancing island-wide restoration efforts, creating a tortoise breeding program for the eventual repopulation of Floriana, and supporting efforts of highland restoration on the inhabited islands. We're working to create an economic system that's compatible with the unique biodiversity in Galapagos, an educational system that prepares citizens to be stewards of the archipelago, and a strong civil society dedicated to and engaged in conservation. We're also working alongside key institutions and individuals within and beyond Galapagos to create an information culture that provides a knowledge base for decision-making and policy. Through our emerging issues work, we're helping external scientists to determine the extent and potential causes of apparent declines in several bird species in the islands, including vermilion flycatchers, warbler finches, and blue-footed boobies. Our institutional mission and objectives are completely aligned with the work of key conservation institutions in Galapagos and the government of Ecuador. This partnership has enabled us to protect Galapagos so that it's demonstrably the best preserved tropical archipelago in the world. There's still time, political will, and expertise to preserve and protect this beautiful place. We're also fortunate to partner with a network of top researchers in their fields, in universities and research institutions throughout the world. These are professionals who are deeply engaged in Galapagos conservation and have decades of experience working in the islands. They willingly donate their time and expertise to provide information, technical advice, and leadership to projects that help answer critical conservation questions. We're effective for many reasons. First, GC focuses on Galapagos, while other international conservation organizations may have programs that fluctuate and change based on institutional priorities. Next, we can call on an extraordinary network of international scientists and their institutions to help us answer questions and respond to issues. That keeps our organization well-informed and fully engaged. Third, Galapagos Conservancy staff has extensive experience working in the islands. Fourth, we partner with key organizations that work in both the conservation and development of a sustainable society. We're also part of an international network of organizations that work cooperatively to combine resources and experiences to address key issues in Galapagos. Next, our funding is focused and agile. We're able to target support immediately to an issue and provide technical backup where needed. And finally, our technical responses are based on real experiences in Galapagos rather than on an academic approach to the issues. On the management and administration front, there are many forms of measuring progress. Are our fundraising programs successful, and are we seeing a regular increase in funding over time? Do we meet national standards for administration and financial transparency? Do we provide credible and timely information to the general public on Galapagos issues? While the immediate outcomes of some of GC's undertakings are relatively easy to measure, Extensive impacts are less clear and are felt long after a project is complete. For instance, eradication projects aimed at eliminating invasive mammals need a considerable amount of time to assess. However, during follow-up, we ask ourselves, did the eradication have the desired effect? Were there any unintended impacts? And we're constantly assessing, adjusting, and improving. Then when we began to work with the resident population on issues such as education, measuring impact can become even more difficult. The important thing is that GC thinks all of this through, we measure and assess, and then we are open to revisiting impacts further down the road. Because our name doesn't appear prominently, perhaps our role in moving conservation forward isn't always well understood or appreciated by an outside audience. GC is dedicated to our role as a facilitator and a catalyst. We've worked behind the scenes for almost 2 decades with leadership at the Galapagos National Park, the Charles Darwin Research Station, local municipalities, and other NGOs. We provide funding and technical advice as well as implementing programs that we then hand off to appropriate government authorities or NGOs. The size of our staff may also not be common knowledge. We're a small group that achieves quite a bit with few resources. We're also a significant financial donor in Galapagos and have been and continue to be involved as participants or funders of many of the main Galapagos initiatives for the long-term conservation of the archipelago. We remain the largest long-term private funder to the Charles Darwin Foundation and the Galapagos National Park. Over the past 25 years, we've provided tens of millions of dollars in support to institutions within and outside of Galapagos dedicated to its conservation. We also reestablished the Galapagos Report. It's a compilation of analytical reports on biodiversity and socioeconomic studies that have been conducted in the islands. We instigated Project Pinta in collaboration with the Galapagos National Park to return tortoises to the island of Pinta. We continue to support the genetics work that'll lead to the restoration of this area and other tortoise populations. We've also supported several international workshops in Galapagos that tackled critical management issues. For instance, we supported the park and the Charles Darwin Foundation on their efforts to restore native mockingbird populations, to eradicate rats, and protect tortoise habitats. All of these workshops led to immediate on-the-ground action. Plus, we initiated the Emerging Issues program and funded 2 pilot studies on species that are potentially in danger. We faced several challenges over the years. For one, we're a small organization with a narrow focus leading to finite funding streams. We work with a national park in a sovereign country. Our successes and failures depend to a large extent on our partners on the ground in Galapagos. Our work is not in the public eye. And as much as people are transformed by their trips to Galapagos, it's far away from their daily lives. So keeping it and its needs fresh in their minds is a constant challenge for us. With additional resources, GC would ensure long-term funding needed for several strategic multi-institutional programs, such as island restoration initiatives. We need a 5 to 10-year financial commitment for projects Floriana, Pinta, and Pinzon. We'd also like to use those funds for educational reform and multi-institutional knowledge management for internal decision-making. GC wants to launch our Emerging Issues program. This is a biannual work session involving international conservation managers, scientists, local activists, and academics who will identify sentinel issues, which, if addressed early, might mitigate larger conservation disasters. We'd like to maximize the effectiveness of Galapagos Conservancy to inform, motivate, and engage us and the international media, donors, scientists, and students through investments in our own staff and outreach materials. And we'd like to build our endowment. Galapagos Conservancy's relatively small size and single focus on Galapagos makes us vulnerable to economic shocks in the U.S., as well as the economic, social, and political conditions in Ecuador. One of the most expensive realities in conservation is the loss of time and momentum when projects are suspended or forced to stop prematurely due to funding interruptions. GC's staff excels in strategic planning and fundraising in developing and first world countries. We also have a lot of experience in nonprofit governance, hiring, and creating and maintaining programs in biodiversity conservation and management. Unfortunately, we see very capable organizations in Ecuador fail because they try to do too much with too little. They're driven by a strong sense of purpose, but they have little practical institutional skills. With additional funds to underwrite staff and some consulting time, GC would expand the work we already do with smaller conservation organizations. We can bring skilled senior people to the table to help them create efficient and effective administrations, articulate their goals and mission, and become clearer in their thinking and planning. Partnerships like these create a better future for Galapagos.